Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield for questions?
The gentleman yield for questions.
I yield.
Thank you, Chairman. How many investigators were there?
Hired a total of 2 investigators, and that was laid out, I think you heard that from Chairman Longoria as he presented.
And so essentially, but there were 5 people that were hired. Was it 5 or 6 that were hired?
6.
Okay. So I misunderstood. I thought there was 5. So how were they chosen?
The active goal was to look for folks that had experience, especially in public integrity matters, white-collar crime, and preferred to have experience gathering information and with a keen eye of whether or not any criminal conduct occurred, because that was the basis of the allegations in the whistleblower lawsuit.
So we're all, I will accidentally say 5 because that's what I have written in here, but were they all from the same city or county?
No.
Had they all worked in Harris County in the past?
To my knowledge, off and on, they may have, but not all of them at the same time.
Would you be surprised if I told you that of the 5 that I was aware of, all 5 of them worked in Harris County with the vice chair of the committee that you're the chair of that initiated this resolution? Would you be surprised by that?
I also wouldn't be surprised, as you have Chairman Dutton behind you, that Harris County has over 2 million people and a lot more attorneys and investigators than many other jurisdictions around the state of Texas.
Would you be surprised to find out that 3 of those 5 were fired by their district attorney at one point?
I believe that you will also learn that they have experience that spans decades and oftentimes worked in environments that swayed and ebbed and flowed pursuant to elected officials.
Are you aware that 3 of the attorneys vote in Democrat primaries and one of them switched to be a Democrat in primaries in 2020?
I do not care how they voted in a primary or an election in Harris County. What I do care about is their work product, their ability to conduct themselves professionally, and to provide an opportunity to gather detailed information on behalf of the General Investigating Committee.
Do you see how it could appear or it could be perceived by anyone in the building or outside the building when they're Democrats? Could you see how it could appear that it's politically motivated investigation?
No,
on their behalf.
I could also see that multiple of those persons that we hired to work for us also worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office for a Republican appointee from a Republican president. So, no, I do not see that appearance.
I believe perception is truth to the person that perceives. So if someone perceives something, it's truth to them, whether it's truth or not. And so I think the hiring and where they're from and the fact that they were fired and that they're Democrats could create the perception that this was politically motivated.
I disagree completely with you.
So my understanding is that they did not reach out to anyone in Attorney General Ken Paxton's office, not from the highest levels or the lowest levels during their investigation. Is that correct?
So as I explained earlier, and you've heard other explanations, in February, Mr. Paxton and members of his staff appeared before the Appropriations Subcommittee and requested $3.3 million to fund a settlement, but declined to provide any additional information. Now, I do know, and we've heard explanation, that a almost 400-page document was produced on their website in defense of that lawsuit, and that's where things were.
So so none of them were talked to since March when this investigation was initiated?
No, sir. We began with the whistleblowers to learn more information about the claims that they had made in their lawsuit.
So we've had a couple of impeachment proceedings over the history of Texas, and in both of those, the opposing party was talked to. As a matter of fact, let's just talk 1975. In 1975, they had 70 to 90 hours of open testimony in meetings. You had 1 day. And those hours that were given, anyone could go watch them and listen to them, and both sides were afforded the opportunity to say their side. In the 1917 case, I believe, they were on the floor in a committee of the whole, and the chairman was asked questions by committee members. The reason I'm saying all this is there's no testimony. As a matter of fact, the AG's office tried to go to your committee on the 24th and were not allowed. That's concerning for me. Can you explain why Attorney General Paxton's office was not contacted, not allowed to testify on their own behalf?
You've got a lot in your questions, so if you'll give me a little
Yes.
latitude here to try to address several different topics. So you talk about 1917, you talk about 1975. In 1917, it involved a recently resigned governor who's no longer in office. In 1975, it involved a district judge from a single county in the state of Texas. Those both involved an era in which didn't contain current House rules that were designed to put the power of adopting articles of impeachment into a committee such as general investigating. So therefore you saw, as you mentioned, a committee of the whole, and I explained that in a memorandum that we provided to this body yesterday. Comparatively to a recently resigned governor or a district judge in a single county in the state of Texas, we are talking about an accused person that is currently in the highest elected office for an attorney in the state of Texas. He sits in that office and can use the significant powers granted to the Attorney General to do a lot of different things. And that makes it very concerning whenever you're going through this process. As you've seen in the last few days, we have seen literally the Attorney General use his agency to lobby this legislature. We have seen the Attorney General call people on the floor.
When you say that, you're making accusations. I hadn't heard that. I'm not saying it's not true, but you're levying that like that is actual truth. Did he call your office?
No, he did not call my office,
Okay.
but I'm familiar with the fact that there are members on this floor that received telephone calls from the Attorney General.
So are you aware
just
that,
the last few days.
Are you aware that in 1975, they didn't give us 48 hours to decide. They gave us both sides of the story, and they gave 3 weeks to decide. Why are we given 48 hours to make this decision and be here today? I feel like it's rushed. I perceive that it could be political weaponization. And I'm asking, why are we given 48 hours when in 1975 they were given 3 weeks with both sides of the story?
You know, if you'll look at the investigatory process in 1975, it lasted approximately 50, 60 days. And so I appreciate the fact that for you it seems sudden and rushed, but for the purposes of the committee, we have been working on this since February, whenever this legislature was asked to spend taxpayer dollars to fund the settlement of a whistleblower lawsuit.
Why didn't we know about that till now?
And this committee's been working since March, and the culmination of our work was placed and downloaded into a very long and lengthy, detailed public meeting, which the video is publicly available and the transcript is publicly available.
So why weren't we as members not apprised of what was being investigated for 2 months when historically the members know? The public knows.
As you are well aware, the House rules, committee rules, and actually sections of the government code place the authority to do investigation with the General Investigating Committee. And in some instances, as you're well aware, that is done in the confidence both to protect those that raise concerns, protect the process for as witnesses go, and to protect the end result, which is providing evidence and information.
So let's compare two investigations without names. There was matter A and B. In the matter that we disposed of earlier this month, the opposing party, the party that was being blamed for something, was asked to testify, as were the people in and around this individual's office. So both sides came and testified to you or were given the opportunity. Can you tell us why in this case they weren't allowed to, but in the other case that was disposed of this same month, the other case they were allowed to and asked to?
I understand, and respectfully, you're comparing an apple and an orange. So when you talk about matter B, talk about a process that involved written complaints of workplace misconduct. That is addressed in the housekeeping resolution, in the House rules, and the committee rules. And it's handled in a very special and specific way. And that is not necessarily the same framework in which we're talking about the articles that we have before us today, which involve also committee functions, but they can be derived in the government code as well as our House rules, but in different sections.
So I believe that they're both also similar in the fact that we removed a duly elected state official from their seat and this is potentially what's going to happen to this individual. So I see large similarities. A couple of other small questions that I want to close out with is, are you aware that both Trump and Cruz made statements about this today? Are you aware that they both did?
I'm not advised.
Okay, they both did, and I'll spare the body some of the statements that Trump made because I don't want to engage in personalities. But Ted Cruz, are you aware that he's a constitutional attorney?
I'm not advised.
He is, and he basically talks about the swamp once this individual moved out of their office, and he's showing full support for the Attorney General. I'm just wondering if you have any statement about that when he's actually seen recently one of the most egregious impeachments in the history of the United States, and he's speaking about it. Do you have any statement about that?
I would only direct he and members of the public to go and watch the video of our investigators and attorneys providing detailed information to the committee and/or read the transcript that's publicly available.
So my last question is, how much did these investigations cost us? Because we were never made aware. We weren't asked about it. Just can you give us an estimation of what was spent to conduct these investigations?
I am not advised of that.
Okay, thank you for being respectful, and I appreciate you, sir.
The time for proponents' open statements has closed.